This is Miracle Healings, and I am Leslie Williams. Cancer. This word has a big impact in each one of us that hear. But against all odds, our guest today not only healed herself, but were able to go through a journey of self-healing and is here to inspire so many of us. Crystal Carothers, thank you so much for being in the show today.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you in the show. Your story is so inspired.
Thank you.
And yeah, especially when we talked about cancer, right? This word already makes a lot of us go into that mode of, oh my God, right?
Yeah.
But there are so many beautiful people like yourself that are here in this planet to give us all the inspiration that we need. Listen to the beautiful stories and overcoming stories like yours. So if you can start, I'm so excited to hear everything about it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm happy to share. So I'm going to start about, I believe it was 2018. I had just turned 35 years old, and I just started having back pain. And prior to that, I had always just been super healthy. I've never, had any medical issues. I've never had been hospitalized or anything. I've never been on any medications. And just very, very rarely ever had to go to the doctor for anything. So I started having really bad back pain. And at first I just started going to see chiropractors. I kind of have always believed a little bit more in alternative or just different therapies instead of the, Western medical model for just things that came up. And, unless of course it's like a car accident or something, but, so that didn't really help and the pain kept getting worse. So then, I went to my doctor, my, traditional doctor, and they pretty much thought that I had like a bulging disc or a herniated disc, something that they said would go away in about 6 to 8 weeks. And they gave me physical therapy, but
in your lower back?
Yeah, my lower back, like almost into my buttock area.
Mm-hmm.
And so 6 weeks passed and my pain just got worse. And in between that time, I also had like a couple trips to the ER, like at 2 or 3 in the morning because my pain got so bad. And this was kind of right in the middle of the opioid crisis, where the doctors suddenly had these really strict regulations, like they're not going to give patients any kind of narcotic pain medication because, which is understandable. We have this like huge crisis where people are becoming really addicted to them. So I was in serious pain, but they weren't willing to give me any kind of pain medication that would touch it. I mean, I was taking so much Advil at that point, and that was not doing anything. And so my pain just kept getting worse. And the nurse practitioner that was like in charge of my case, she kept kind of looking at me suspiciously, like she thought I was going to the ER just to try to get like harder pain, stronger pain medications and things like that. And it sort of became apparent that I didn't really have a herniated disc. Mm-hmm. Or, she just didn't know what to do with me. I would call her all the time crying that I was in pain. And they also took x-rays and found nothing. So, 2 or 3 months passed. And then I just said to her, I know something's wrong with my body. I need you to order me an MRI. And for some reason in my insurance system, they're just very they don't want to order MRIs unless they really, really feel like it's necessary. So there was some resistance. And then I just kept insisting. And finally she ordered it. And she said, well, it's going to be a waste of your $500 copay, because I had to pay. That was my portion that I had to pay. And I was like, I don't care. I just need to get this MRI.
So at that point, you were absolutely covered in pain, and probably your emotions were to the roof, all that.
Yeah, I was,
Because nobody was listening to you, and you have to deal with the fact that you didn't have any medication that could help you with the pain, all that. Right.
exactly. So yes, I was in all this pain, but what was even worse was just going through that, like nobody knew what to do with me, and people
Right.
looked at me like I was just out to get pain medication. I mean, that is really, really frustrating, and people go through that all the time. And I have a lot of compassion because I know what that's like to just have doctors and nurses, these people who are supposed to know how to help you, and they don't. And even they just treat you like, you're crazy or something. It's in your head. Because back pain, especially, is something that so many people go to the doctor having complaints about, and they just hear that all the time.
Right.
But anyway, I mean, it was just getting harder for me to drive to like work. And anyway, I get this MRI, and she calls me the next day, the nurse practitioner, and she like never returns my calls right away. So I just thought that was strange that she was like calling me and trying to get a hold of me. And so finally she got a hold of me, and she said, we found the problem, and there's this 2 to 3 inch mass on your sacrum. And so the first thing I said was like, mass, like, what does that mean? Is that a tumor? And that's pretty much what any doctor will say, for tumor, they just, kind of the medical jargon. And she said, yes, but we don't know if it's benign or cancerous. So, we're going to recommend, we're going to refer you to the orthopedic surgeon, and he's a really great doctor, and you're going to be in good hands. And I mean, her whole demeanor just completely changed. So now she was just totally like, I could tell she felt sort of bad, and just maybe she wasn't taking this case seriously. And she was not expecting that. And I could just tell in her voice.
So just for the sake for the listeners to understand, so the diagnosis, you haven't had any blood tests or anything, just the x-rays by then?
Yeah, I guess I had some general blood work, I think I had a lot of little things that they did, but mostly it was just like physical therapy. And yes, I had x-rays, one of those trips to the ER, at 3 a.m. Well, we'll just take x-rays just in case, but it's just rare that they find anything.
With the MRI, they were able to see it and diagnose.
Right. So there's a lot of things that you can't pick up on x-rays that you'll see on MRIs. So that was a big shock for me. And I called my mom, and she said, she was a little bit shocked too. And she's like, you mean 2 to 3 centimeters, right? Because 2 to 3 inches would just be insanely big. Right. And I have no idea, because I've never really been around anybody with cancer or tumors. I mean, both my father and my mother's side are pretty healthy. And I was like, no, she said 2 to 3 inches. And my mom was like, I don't believe that. I think you misheard her. She must have said 2 to 3 centimeters, because that would be a normal tumor size, whether it was malignant or benign. And I called her back, the nurse practitioner, and she said, no, it's 2 to 3 inches. It's about the size of an egg, which is why you're having so much pain. And she said, it's also getting involved in all the nerves in the, like the sciatic nerve and all those nerves that run down all the way down your legs, which, I was having so much nerve pain. And so,
so the pain was going down from the lower
the legs. Yeah. All like radiating all down my leg. Yeah.
All the way to.
Yeah. So I went to go see the orthopedic surgeon, and he did a biopsy. And about a week later, it came back, and I went to his office, and he said, you have cancer. And I was just in shock, because I think that I had been thinking it was just going to be something benign, because I'm young and I've always been very into exercise, very active, and also very into nutrition and eating healthy. And I would put, kale in my smoothie every morning, and I would take supplements. And I just always had it in my head that cancer is for somebody who smokes or drinks too much alcohol or eats fast food. And so that was a big shock. But I was kind of like, okay, well, how do we take care of this? And he said, well, this type of cancer is called chordoma, and it's a very rare cancer that affects less than 1 in 1 million people. And bone cancer, I think only 1% of cancers are bone cancers. And then within the bone cancers, there's like 4 or 5 different types. And then I have the rarest type of bone cancer. And
so very important. The MRI, it was because it's, as I understood, it's hard to diagnose, right?
Yeah, a lot of people with this type
very hard to be diagnosed.
Yeah, a lot of people with this type of cancer will go years without getting a diagnosis, just because it sometimes it's just like people don't want to give you MRIs, or they just think it's back pain, and there could just be so many other reasons for back pain. So they, for my case, within 3 months, I figured out what I had. So that was pretty fast compared to a lot of other people. But so he said, so this type of cancer is a little bit strange because it does not respond to chemotherapy because it's a slow growing tumor. And so chemotherapy only works for fast growing tumors. So most tumors, will respond to chemotherapy, but this one doesn't. And I was like, okay, good, because I don't think I would really want to have chemotherapy anyway. And then he said it's also resistant to radiation. So radiation also doesn't work. And I was like, okay, so we just have surgery, right? And he's like, yes, that's the primary treatment. And I was like, okay, so sign me up. Let's do this. I was just really wanting to get back to my regular life, and I was really wanting to get out of pain. So I just wanted to do whatever would get me out of this pain that I was in. Mm-hmm. And he said, yes, we're going to do this surgery, but it's quite intensive. And to do the surgery, we have to basically resect your sacrum. And I said, what does that mean? Do a resection, or I don't remember the exact words he used, but basically that meant to amputate my sacrum, my sacral bone, which is,
okay, right.
It's the very end of your spine, and it includes the tailbone, basically. Right. So I was like, okay. And then he said, and we'll also have to sever the root nerves. And those are the nerves that kind of come out of your lower back, and they control your bowel and bladder. So once he said that, I was just in shock. I was like, what do you mean? Like, I'm not going to have any bowel or bladder control anymore? And he says, no, because we have to remove those nerves. And so he was basically telling me that to have this surgery, that having this surgery, I would have to be, wearing adult diapers for the rest of my life. So that was like the devastating part, where I was just like, oh man, I just lost it, because I couldn't believe that at 35, I was just like young, athletic. I was a big traveler, and just to have, that kind of loss was just like really incomprehensible. So I just kind of lost it there, and I walked out of that appointment.
All that pain, and you were not expecting something that radical, right?
Yeah. And I mean, on top of that, it's just such a huge recovery. And I walked out of that appointment like, I'm not getting that surgery. Like, there has to be another way. So that was kind of my attitude. I've always been a little bit skeptical, and not skeptical of doctors, but just like, I don't think that they are the, gods that a lot of people perceive them to be. I don't put them on a pedestal. And I've also just prior to that, I have always loved these stories of people who, they healed themselves regardless of what their doctor said. Awesome. And, or maybe their doctor said something along the lines of, there's nothing we can do for you, so.
Yeah, I loved what you said. I have to catch this because it was wonderful. You mentioned that I got out of there thinking there must be something else. There must be another way. That was my attitude. This is so important, right? It's that means that you were open to something else. You didn't give your power away not to only that one possibility, right?
Right. I
That
didn't accept
wonderful.
that.
So,
Yeah. So I think it's important that if, regardless of whatever kind of diagnosis you receive, you don't always have to accept what the doctor says as the course of treatment. I think that we have our own choices and there could always be another way around. And
this is taking the responsibility, taking the power yourself to your health, to you, right?
Exactly.
That's the path to healing.
Yeah. So what I did first was I went and got a second opinion, and that doctor told me exactly the same thing. And then I went to a different doctor, a radiologist, and he told me exactly the same thing. Like, there's no other way. You have to have surgery. And I was seeing specialists, people that were specialized in this type of cancer. And after that, I ended up going to, I just put it on site, they said this is a slow growing tumor. So I said, okay, maybe I have some time to really think about my options and try to see if there's another way. And I've always been a spiritual person, and I read about John of God in Brazil. So I don't know if I mentioned that to you, but I went to Brazil with my sister and to Abadania. And I wanted to have a spiritual healing. And that didn't end up happening. I did have some interesting, experiences there. I think it was a very spiritual place, but I was in so much pain. I'm sorry?
With the mediumship that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So a lot of people, I had heard about a lot of people having, profound healings there, and I just wanted to go and I wanted to see. And so I had a lot of hope. But I ended up leaving a little bit early just because I was in so much pain, and it was just kind of scary for me to be away from like doctors. I had so much fear because of this pain. And so I ended up like going back a little bit early, but I was there for about 2 weeks. And I came back, and they wanted me to get another MRI to kind of prepare for surgery. It's just kind of the protocol. And I still didn't have a surgery date, but I was like, well, I might as well go get an MRI because, I want to see what's going on. And I went and I got my results a few days later, and the tumor, this slow growing tumor, had tripled in size. Wow. So I have to say slow growing with quotation.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's one of the main characteristics of this type of cancer is that it is slow growing.
Right.
So
that's why I didn't respond.
So the oncologist just kind of freaks out, and he throws in the towel. He doesn't want to do my surgery anymore. He refers me to a specialist at UCLA. Because now the surgery was going to be more complicated. And they wanted to rebiopsy me also because they were just like, maybe you got the wrong diagnosis because this doesn't seem right that this type of cancer would grow that fast. Yes. And they rebiopsied me, and it was this cancer called chordoma, but mine was just acting very uncharacteristically. So for some reason, to this day, I have no idea why my particular case was fast growing. But if you can remember, it was an egg before, and now it was 3 times the size. So now it was about the size of a grapefruit. And that's why I was having so much pain and like had to come home early from Brazil because it was growing so much. So I was, again, pretty devastated, but also trying to take everything in stride. I still was not 100% sure if I wanted to get surgery, but by now I was considering it more and more because it's like there's this thing growing inside of me. It's fast growing. I need to do something and I need to do it fast. So I went to see the UCLA specialist, who, of course, said surgery is the only way, the only way, the only way. And the other thing I didn't mention is that this surgery requires 4 different surgeons. So it's like an orthopedic surgeon, a plastic surgeon, a neurosurgeon, and a general surgeon. So they needed to get all 4 of these doctors together on the same day. So it was like a scheduling conflict. So they were having like a hard time scheduling it. And on top of that, I found out from the specialist that I would have to have 2 incisions, one in the front and one in the back. So he said, you would have to have, on the first day of surgery, we would cut you open from the front, because they're basically sawing off my sacrum and they have to approach it from both sides of my body. So that just gives you an idea of how gruesome, like how brutal this surgery is. And then they said things like, after your surgery, basically it's like a 2-week hospital stay followed by like an in-house physical therapy for another few weeks. You have to get cleared to sit. So I can't sit for like 6 weeks after the surgery. And then after 6 weeks, you can sit for like 15 minutes a day. And basically I would be using a walker for up to 6 months after the surgery. I mean, this is like no easy surgery. So that's kind of another big part of like why I didn't want to get it.
Everything goes well, right?
Yeah. But then he said something that none of the other doctors had told me. And he said, you'll most likely never be able to surf again, because we have to put hardware in your spine, in your pelvis, and you won't be able to do any of these like high impact sports. It won't be able to sustain that. So you would just have to keep getting surgeries. And so that was also really devastating to me, because I really live to surf and it's just like my biggest passion. And I just,
deal breaker.
Yeah, I was like, deal breaker, I was like, okay, I don't care if I have to wear adult diapers, but taking away my surfing, that is not okay. So, I just was like really upset. And anyway, so they were trying to schedule my surgery. I went, I was waiting and calling like every day. I had so much fear in my body. Like it got to the point where I was just like, when are you going to have my surgery? I want to have my surgery now, like I because I had so much fear, and and then they also instilled this fear in my mind, like the bigger the tumor gets, the more likely it is to spread. So at any point it could jump to my lungs or my brain. And at that point, then it's like, it's untreatable, because they're saying like, as long as we do the surgery and as long as it doesn't spread, you'll have a long life. You know what I mean? But once it spreads, then it's a much more difficult situation, as we know. So I had that fear in me as well. And anyway, one day, to kind of get away from it all, I went to have lunch with a friend, and I was telling her about everything going on with the tumor and how I was waiting for them to schedule my surgery. And then all of a sudden, a woman who's sitting at the table next to us, she just interrupts and she's like, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you guys. And she starts telling us her story of healing herself from cancer, from stage 4 breast cancer. And she said, all of my tumors have disappeared in the last 9 months. And I'm just like, how, where, and she said, I went to this cancer clinic in Tijuana, and it's called the Oasis of Hope Hospital. And she said, they give you all these nutraceuticals, which are basically supplements, vitamins. You're on a special diet. And then you stay there for 3 weeks. And then when you go home, you continue taking the pills and you continue with the diet. But also when you're there, they give you a dendritic cell vaccine, which is supposed to supercharge your immune system to fight the cancer. Mm-hmm. And so she's giving me all this information. I was like, okay, that's great. I'll look into it. And she said, here's my information if you want to ask me any questions. And her name was also Crystal. So I was like, oh, that's funny. Your name is Crystal. So anyway, I went home, I looked into it, and I said, you know what? While I'm waiting for this surgery, I might as well go for 3 weeks to this cancer clinic in Mexico and see what happens.
Surgeons, right?
The only thing that was holding me back was that it was a lot of money that I didn't have. So I ended up putting it on my credit cards, like maxing out like 3 or 4 different credit cards. Because I mean, when you're in that state, you're pretty willing to try everything, you know, and money just didn't mean a thing to me.
Right, your life.
So I went, and it was a great experience. I did a lot of high dose vitamin C infusions, and I got this dendritic cell vaccine. They did blood work like almost every day. I met with some top of the line oncologists that, you know, are Harvard educated, and
nutrition as well.
Oh, yeah. And so for 3 weeks, I ate a very clean vegetarian diet. And yeah, and then at the end of the 3 weeks, I had a CT scan, and I was again really hoping, okay, maybe this time it will be smaller because of all the treatments I've been getting.
Did you feel better?
I was feeling better. Maybe not necessarily at the site of the tumor, but I just feel like overall, like having more energy, feeling healthier. And so I go to get the CT scan, and the results came back and the tumor was bigger. So I was really, really, again, devastated, disappointed. They never say like the results would happen that fast anyway, but I was expecting it to at least not be bigger. You know what I mean? Like maybe the same size would be fine, but just the fact that it was still growing in spite of like everything that I was throwing at it. And also I forgot to mention that prior to that, I was also seeing a naturopathic doctor who was having me do a lot of high dose vitamin C, and I mean, so many different supplements. Like I was taking 30 pills a day at least, and, you know, diet.
Take opportunity to mention that there's a lot of studies that show that high doses of vitamin C can help. So many different treatments, you know, fighting cancer. So I just wanted to mention.
Yeah. So it's like, it's supposed to be like a natural chemotherapy.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and I think it does work for a lot of people, you know, especially in combination with a lot of other therapies, like, or natural therapies.
As we were doing, changing the whole lifestyle.
Right? Yeah. But in general, I just think this particular tumor that I had,
was very rare.
It's so stubborn, you know what I mean? Because like they said, it doesn't respond to radiation. It doesn't respond to chemotherapy, you know, and it's ridiculous. So I came back home, but I still continued to have hope that maybe this dendritic cell vaccine that I got would work. And there's one other important thing I forgot to mention, that when I was there at this clinic, the oncologists, I would meet with them maybe once a week, and they would go over my medical reports and everything, my medical record, and they became familiar with my case and the surgery that I was supposed to get. And they just did not like at all. They were very real with me. Like, this surgery is really brutal, and you're going to have a lot of recovery from that, you know? And so I didn't know this, but they were kind of researching on my behalf, like behind the scenes, for other options.
Right.
And both of these doctors, they're strong believers in combining both, like Western medical model and the complementary or alternative therapies. So they found this other treatment that I could try, and they brought it to my attention, and they said, there's this type of radiation. It's not the traditional radiation. It's called proton beam radiation. And it's a much more targeted therapy. So it doesn't go through your whole body. It's just very targeted so a lot of people do it for like brain tumors, or any kind of tumor that's in a hard to reach place, so they can't operate. And they said, we found 2 studies where they treated chordoma patients. Chordoma is the cancer I had, with only
in the US.
No, the the studies, one was from Japan and one was from Italy.
Okay.
And yeah, so they found 2 studies where they had only treated these patients with proton beam radiation. They never had surgery because either they had refused surgery or they were too old, because like once you're in your 70s, you're not expected to recover from this type of surgery. It's so strong, you know, or heavy. So I started looking into that as an option. And the doctors were never like, you should definitely do this. They always wanted to leave it up to me, because even there was these 2 studies were just not a lot of research, because this is such a rare cancer. That's the big disadvantage, is there's not a lot of research out there. So, and also the studies were like super small, like only 27 people or only 30 people. But I mean, the success rates were about as high as surgery. Mm-hmm. So I kept looking into that, you know, but they never wanted to tell me like to do it. They left it up to me, because of course it's still a big risk to do this instead of the surgery. And they don't have like the long-term results. You know, that was the other thing.
And so it was going fast. It was going.
So, well, the studies report, like the 5-year results, but they don't report like the 10-year or the 15-year success rate. So whereas the surgery, they do have all of that data for you to see your, you know, your chances of survival are really high in 5 years, but less high in 10 years and then 15 years. And so it kind of keeps going down. But of course, the other thing that I had to consider was that most people who are diagnosed with this are in their 50s and 60s at least. So it's also rare for me to be this age with this type of cancer. I mean, for any type of cancer, it's much more rare for somebody young to have it. So I decided that I was going to do this, and, you know, instead of the surgery. So they finally called me from UCLA and they said, we got you a surgery date. And I just said, I'm not doing surgery anymore. I'm doing proton beam radiation. So they were kind of shocked. And but I just felt like it was right, you know, and I don't know, you know, I feel like that meeting with that woman named Crystal that told me about this hospital was sort of, maybe, I know it was meant to happen for a reason. And I think one of those reasons was maybe to lead me away from surgery in a different route.
Track the situation to yourself. Because it's the beginning. You had that feeling. There must be something else. There must be, you were searching, you know, inside of you, and you attract the situation to yourself. That's wonderful.
Exactly. So I went into proton beam radiation, and the radiologist was like, of course we recommend surgery, but if you're going to refuse surgery, we're happy to treat you. And I said, yes, I refuse surgery. So, I started going in every day, Monday through Friday, it was supposed to be for 8 weeks. So, I started the treatment, and within a week, I was in so much more pain. I mean, the pain was just incredible. I could barely walk. I didn't really expect radiation to be painful, but it really, really was. And it was for me, especially because the tumor is so wrapped around those nerves. Right. It's like my nerves were getting hit too. And the other thing that I forgot to mention is that they said, because this is such a radio resistant tumor, that they have to give me extra high doses of the radiation. So most cancer patients have somewhere between like 45 to 60, what they call grays, which is like the dose of radiation. But mine was about 75 to 80. So it was like a higher dose of radiation. So could be that's also the reason why for me it was painful. Because I was reading online and everybody was like, oh yeah, just the worst thing about radiation is the burning of the skin. And that was definitely like nothing to me compared to what I was experiencing pain-wise in the site of the tumor. And also when it gets hit, it kind of inflames. So that's also why it was painful. So after about 5 days, I quit because I was in so much pain. And the oncologist called and he said, you need to finish the treatment. And then my other oncologist called and like everybody was rallying around me to get me to finish. He's like, we're going to go ahead and up your pain medication. And by the way, by that time I was already on morphine. So it's like, once I was diagnosed with cancer, nobody really had any problem with giving me higher doses of pain medication, but they gave me an even higher dose to kind of get me to continue. And I was like, okay. They also put me on steroids and like a really strong steroid called dexamethasone. And I continued the treatment, but my pain was just incredibly. And so every week it was just like, I was back to pain management, like trying to get something else that might help me. So at one point I was on 9 different pain medications. So I was on like 180 milligrams of morphine. And then on top of that, I was taking Dilaudid, which is like another narcotic. Mm-hmm. And then I was on the steroid. And then I was on gabapentin, which was like for the nerve pain. And all of these other medicines that I try that I can't even remember. I mean, muscle relaxers and all that stuff. So I was just really doped up and going through so much pain. And so at that time, like, that I started doing my radiation, that's when I stopped being able to walk. I could maybe walk like a few steps and then it would get painful because what was happening was like all the nerves would fire up and down my legs and they would stop if I laid down. So I couldn't walk. And then even if I just was standing, it would still be painful. So I couldn't walk, I couldn't stand. And then I also could not sit. Because you can imagine that the location of the tumor was right on my sacrum, like right on my sit bones, right? So, I mean, I could sit on my knees, you know, that was basically it. So I spent most of my time just laying on my stomach. And every time I got into the car, I mean, I could not drive at that point. My mom, she took me to every appointment, but I would lay in the back of her car flat on my stomach. And that was the only way I could get to the appointments. And then once I got to the appointments, I would have a walker and I would go very slowly to my appointment. And then once I got into the cancer center for my treatment, I could not sit down in the waiting room. So they would take me to this special room so I could lie down on a bed. I mean, I just like everywhere I went, I like had to lie down if I went anywhere. If there was nowhere to lie down, I mean, I would have to just lie down on the floor. And I did that once when I went to go pick up my pain prescription. I could not sit, I could not stand. I literally just laid on the ground and everybody was like, what is she doing? That was the only way I could get a break from the pain. You know what I mean? So it was just, I mean, eventually my mom she became my superhero, just doing everything for me, like making me breakfast, lunch, dinner. Because I couldn't do much at that point. So I finished my radiation after 8 weeks. And I think I actually quit twice because it was that much pain. And I just couldn't get myself to go in the car to go to the treatment sometimes. Like I just literally like could not. It's just like you're going to get more pain when you're already in so much pain. It's really hard. So anyway, I finished. And every week when I wasn't in radiation, he would come in and he would say, the tumor is the same size, the tumor is the same size. And I was still hoping like after, maybe a couple months after whatever on my next MRI that I would see some progress. Although I was still disappointed every time he said it's the same, because I thought if I'm experiencing so much pain, I should have some kind of result, Right. So I finished my treatment in November of 2018. And they said my next MRI would be February 2019. So February 2019 came, I got my MRI and the results came in and it was bigger, even bigger. And I just was so devastated. I mean, I was like, I'm trying everything. I'm throwing everything at this thing. And I still had so much fear and anxiety. And I was just, more than anything, I was just like, the pain really got to me. So I think that was a really low point for me. And I was really depressed
At this point,
around that time.
not to.
Yeah. I've never really had an issue with depression.
Right.
Until that time. I was really just, sometimes the pain would be so bad that I would actually pray to just not wake up in the morning. It was never like I was suicidal, but I just was like, I don't want to deal with this pain.
Away all that.
Yeah. So I did get to that point where I did want to give up, especially after that. So after I kind of calmed down a little bit and was like, okay, maybe I need to try something else. Like, what else is there that I can do? The first thing that popped into my mind was that one of the women that I had met and made friends with at the cancer clinic in Tijuana, she had told me about Joe Dispenza. So she said to me, and her name was Jackie, by the way, and she had breast cancer. She was another patient there. And she said, whenever I feel down and depressed, I just watch Dr. Joe Dispenza videos on YouTube. And I made a mental note of that. So I never like looked into it, or I forgot about it, I guess. And then
you were going through so much, right?
Yeah, I was just in so much chaos. But I guess I put it in the back of my head, made a little mental note of it. And then it came up at this time because I was feeling so down. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to check out this Dr. Joe guy. So I start watching his videos on YouTube, and I just loved what he said. And I immediately felt like, okay, I can feel better. I can improve my emotions, because his whole thing is, we want to feel the emotions of our future, right? So if we want healing, we need to feel love, joy, gratitude, inspiration, peace. And then I started thinking, like, how would I feel if I were healed? And then another thing that I really picked up from him was just like gratitude, and so I just really started diving into just what was I grateful for, my family, my friends. I had so much support during this time between, my friends and family, and I felt so much love. Yeah. So I just started kind of focusing on that. And then I started reading his books. So I read all 4 of his books. And then I started doing his meditations. So I downloaded his meditations, and I had been doing meditation, but really I would do like meditation for 10 minutes a day, maybe.
Right.
And sometimes that wasn't enough to get past all of my fear and my anxiety. So when I did his meditations, were much longer, sometimes like an hour of guided meditations, I really went deeper. And so I'll never forget that. I think it was like after
the first time that you ever did it, how you felt after you were done.
So I don't remember how I felt after the first time, but I do remember very vividly how I felt like after a week. Okay. So after like 1 week of doing it every day, so for like 7 days, I felt so much peace. Like I just felt like all the fear and anxiety just evaporated from my body. And I remember it very well because I actually wrote a blog post. And so I can look back at the blog post and see like, okay, that's when I was really feeling at peace, because that was like the whole point of like my blog post. I was just like, I feel very at peace, and I feel like everything's going to be okay. And
which one were you doing?
I believe I was doing, it was, no, it wasn't that one. It was, You Are the Placebo. Yeah. But I don't remember. I don't think that was the title, but it's one of his earlier ones. And in the meditation, I just remember that I'm focusing on space. So like my eyes are closed, but I'm just focusing on the space of the room. And then I kind of moved on to tuning into new potentials. So tuning into new potentials, I loved, because that is sort of like part meditation, part visualization. And so at the end, I'm sort of imagining myself. I'm going through all the imaginative scenarios of me being healed. I'm imagining, the doctor telling me that I have no more cancer in my body. I'm imagining telling my friends and family. I'm imagining like running again, surfing again.
And feeling good.
And just being totally pain-free. I think I imagined like throwing all my pain medications in the dumpster. Like I just had all these different scenarios that I had fun with, you know? And then especially after those, like I would just come out of that meditation just feeling like, great, okay, I'm good. Like everything's going to be okay. And so it was really, really helpful, those meditations. So I started doing that in February, of 2019, after I got that really ugly MRI. Right. And by the way, I said it was like a grapefruit, but that was like previously. And then it kept, it kept getting actually bigger than that. So I stopped conceptualizing, but I remember when it was the biggest, I saw 14 centimeters as like the biggest it ever was. And I believe that was like a honeydew melon, like a cantaloupe, or like, so it's like bigger than a grapefruit, So, I mean, just to give you an idea of how big it was. So what happened next?
Doing every day, right?
I was doing it every day, and I didn't want to stop because it was making me feel good. And I also didn't want to stop because I just felt like it was what I needed to do for my mental health. Like I was like, okay, I love being at peace. And that was my only expectation with it. Really, I was just like, this is good for my mental health. It's definitely going to keep like the negativity or the fear at bay. So I just kept doing it every day. And then within a month or two, I was on a Joe Dispenza Facebook group, and I saw that they have a scholarship for his 7-day retreats. So he does these 7-day retreats around the world. And I really wanted to go to one. I also was like watching all the healing testimonials on YouTube.
Right.
And so many of the people there said like they healed when they went to a retreat, So I was like, I would love to go. So I filled out the application for the scholarship because at the time I just had no money, and they're not cheap to go there. I was not working for 9 months, and I had all this credit card debt from the clinic in Tijuana. And so yeah, I just sent in my application, and I totally forgot about it. And I didn't even know if I would even be able to fly. You know what I mean? Because I know they had one coming up, and
you could not see it and all that.
Yeah, and they had one coming up in Portland, Oregon. So that's the one I was applying to go to, and that's like an 1.5-hour flight, I believe, 1.5 hours, maybe 2 hours. And I was like, maybe I could sit that long. Like maybe I could do it. Because at that time I started to notice that I was getting a little bit better in terms of like, I was sitting like for longer periods of times. Like I remember,
within 2 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Within 2 months, I noticed like I was able to sit at the dinner table with my family, instead of like eat dinner on the floor. or like, maybe I remember I would be able to stand up for my entire shower, instead of like having to sit down or something, just little things like that.
Right.
I started to notice I was able to stand up long enough to make myself breakfast, so I was like not having to be as dependent on my mom and things like that. So I started to notice that, but I didn't think that was necessarily anything to do with like the tumor or the meditations. I was just like, this is great. But honestly, I was just so much more in the moment that I wasn't like analyzing everything, honestly.
That's so important that you brought up, being in the moment. So your mind shift from all the out there, the doctors, what they were saying, and the MRI results and everything, and right. And then what it did, you shift inwards.
Yes, definitely.
Miracles start to happen.
Exactly. So my next MRI was in May. So they're doing them every 3 months, of course. And it was like the first time I went to my MRI where I didn't have so much anxiety, because I had already had like 9 MRIs, and every single MRI that I had was bigger. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think this is probably my 9th MRI that I was going into, but like every single one was bigger, but I didn't even think about like the outcome. I just went in as if I were going to the dentist, like,
because you were in the moment. Now your mind was.
Yeah. I mean, in retrospect, I realized that, but I didn't even realize how peaceful I was. But looking back on it, I realized it was just like, oh, it's another appointment, whatever. And they usually wait like 1 week to give me the results. So I got my MRI and I was like, okay, I'll probably hear back in a week. They called me the next day. So actually I have to back up. So I remember I got the MRI May 1st. Okay. So May 2nd, that morning I wake up, I did a meditation, Joe Dispenza meditation. And as soon as I stopped the meditation, I heard a sound from my email, from my inbox, like, oh, you have an email, my phone was dinging. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that is so weird because I know that I put my phone on silent, but maybe I'm tripping, maybe I didn't. Okay. So I checked my email and it is from that scholarship that I applied to. And they told me that I won a scholarship to go to the week-long retreat. So I was so excited. I was so happy. And I think by May, I was confident in my ability to be able to sit in a plane and sit for longer periods of time. So I was so excited. And then I remember I went out to run an errand and I came back. And as soon as I walked into the house, my mom, she said, where were you? I was calling you. The doctors called. They said your tumor shrunk. And she just surprised me with that. And I was like, what? And I just ran over to my computer because I knew that the report would have uploaded already. So I went to check the email. And sure enough, the MRI was there, the report was there, and it had shrunk drastically. So
with 2 months.
No, 3 months by now. 3 months of meditation. Yeah, it had shrunk. And so that was just like, oh my God, what a beautiful day. Like 2 amazing things happened.
So then by then you put 2 and 2 together and you think, okay, maybe this is working.
Well, I thought, okay, maybe this meditation is really working, but I honestly don't remember if that's what I thought. I have to probably look back at my journals because I'm sure I wrote about it. I was journaling every day. I mean, I have stacks of journals.
Which is very important too.
Yeah.
So much to decompress and just vent when you journal. It
was so helpful. So helpful.
Yeah.
So everybody was like, oh my God, this is great news. And this is wonderful. So I basically, what happened was 2 or 3 nights later, I remember I woke up at 3 a.m. and I just sat straight up and I had this thought, there's a connection between there's the reason why these 2 things happened on the same day. The scholarship is related to the meditation and the good news about the tumor. I just thought it was a coincidence that those 2 things happened on the same day, but it's actually a synchronicity. Yes. So it was just my brain or my mind telling me, or maybe it was a message from the divine, hello, wake up, there's a connection. And so when I had that realization at 3 a.m, that's when it really hit me. Okay, I definitely am going to continue doing this meditation because it's helping me physically.
And so Dr. Joe always tells this. He started his meditations around 4, and he always is the best time. At that time, we are navigating theta state, and is our creative state. So of course, we will have that connection.
Yeah, and he also talks about synchronicities, which I never really understood until I kind of followed his work, and just other spiritual teachers talk about that too. But the synchronicity is a message from the divine that you're on the right path, or keep doing what you're doing, or, different messages can be from it. But
now you are at 3 o'clock in the morning with all that realization giving you the boost of energy, because all high elevated emotions that he calls, right?
Yeah.
All the cells in your body were receiving that boost of love, of energy, of enthusiasm, right?
Exactly. So I was like, wow, okay. And so I just diligently kept doing these meditations every day. And I was never having any profound mystical experiences. I just would feel at peace, really. And so I went to the retreat in July. So I got my last MRI in May. They said my next MRI would be September. So I went in July to the retreat, and I don't know what I was expecting, but I did kind of come away like a little bit disappointed because I didn't feel like anything powerful happened to me. And I always feel like, oh, if like, I don't know, because I was surrounded by so many other people with these amazing, powerful, mystical experiences and healings. And I was like, I want to be one of those people that just like, I go into a meditation and I know I'm healed. And that wasn't, it was a great experience. And I had wonderful meditations, but nothing like profound or mystical, maybe like I wanted or was expecting. But I still had a great trip.
This is one of the statements that Dr. Joe kind of he does. He says some, keep doing the work and you will see the results. Don't expect that, oh, I'm going to connect and have, and he mentioned that it took him a while to have the first sound experience from.
Well, one of the best things was like, there's a woman who came up on the stage and she was giving her testimonial. And she said, I never had a mystical experience. I never had any like powerful meditation. She said, I just kept doing the work day by day by day. And I don't remember how long it was. Maybe it was 6 months or maybe it was 2 years, but then she was completely healed of her ailment, which I believe was like really serious colitis. And when she said that, I just started crying because I knew that that was going to be my situation too. Or maybe I just resonated.
That is a profound experience.
So, and then he kind of interrupted her and he said, not everybody has the powerful like healing and one meditation. Like some people, it's just like little by little. And I just really felt like that was my situation. So I kept doing the work. I went home and, they also have these coherence healings. Have you been to one of his week-long meditation?
Not yet.
Okay. So they do these, one of the best parts is like they do these coherence healings. The coherence healing is like when 8 people surround one person who's like laying on the ground with just like loving energy. And supposedly this is like the time, if you're going to have a healing, it's going to be during the coherence healing because just like energy is so powerful and everybody's so into it. So I was honored to be a Healy. So they chose me to be in the center of one of these healing circles, which I was just so grateful for. And a lot of people, that's the time where a lot of people had like this really incredible experiences. Like some people would be shaking, other people would be crying or screaming, but not like in a bad way or anything. Just powerful thing.
You went from fear to boost of love, unconditional love, connected with the source.
Yeah. So I did the coherence healing and then it was just really subtle for me. Like I felt kind of love, I felt grateful, but I really wanted there to be like some powerful, I wanted to levitate or something. I don't know what I wanted, but nothing big happened. And I just kind of went home. I was like, okay, that was that. And then September came around and I had an MRI. And sure enough, my MRI showed again, huge shrinkage, like significant shrinkage. So I was just like, wow, I really think it had to do with that retreat, but I can't be sure. But I just felt like I could not see or feel the effects, but they happened, they're invisible. So I was just, of course, elated. And by that time I was getting off all my medications. It actually took a while because I was on such high doses and I really had to kind of little by little, but I really will say that 100% without a doubt, meditation helped me get off my medications. And there's so much research to back that up too. I was just basically like rewiring my brain to like not have this, So it's hard to know or say to people like, oh yes, meditation cured me because there's so many other things that I did do. And when I was getting these good results with my MRI, everybody was taking credit. Like, the doctors in Tijuana were saying, oh, it's a delayed reaction to the dendritic cell vaccine. And then the radiologist was like, oh, it's a delayed reaction to the proton beam radiation. And then my naturopathic doctor was like, oh, it's a delayed reaction to all the therapies that you were getting with me.
It's a totally different approach is how traditional medicine approached. It's mechanically, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to believe that
Dr.
Joe's work and meditation.
And then like even my chiropractor was like, Yeah, ever since you started coming to see me, you've been getting better and better. And you know, so it's hard to say. I think it was a combination of everything, but without a doubt, meditation facilitated my healing and definitely contributed a big deal to it. And you
And
know,
that's important to say that Dr. Joe always mentioned that we are, when we do the work, and I'm going to briefly talk about Dr. Joe Dispenza. He is just to show the viewers one of his books. I fully recommend you guys to search. You'll find the link. But one of the things that he explains is that we are sending new information to our brain. So when you were doing all the stimulating your brain to get off the world and go to the unknown, and then visualizing you putting new information in all the cells that had the old connection with the past information that created fear and created everything else in our bodies now are receiving this new information.
yeah.
And the cells will send a new signal to all the parts of our bodies, reprogram your subconscious mind as well, right? And you were doing all that.
Yeah.
So there's no way, because everything is connected.
Yeah. So it's powerful. And I definitely did a lot of research, you know, about the emotional connection and just sort of our mind patterns and the scripts that are running subconsciously. And meditation works to just like break that, you know, pattern of thinking. And there's so much that we're not aware of because it's in our subconscious mind. And
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I really discovered a lot. I discovered a lot about myself, and I discovered a lot about subconscious patterns. And I think that the meditation helped to kind of disrupt that or change that. So yeah. So basically what happened is, you know, ever since that MRI, by October of 2019, I was 100% off all my medications, which was just amazing, and 100% pain free.
Kept the meditations every day.
Yeah, every day.
Important.
And I still do his meditations, although now I do sometimes I just do I mix it up. So maybe I'll do his meditations like once or twice a week, but I still meditate every day. Right. I might do a different type of meditation just because I'm kind of trying to expand and try a few different things. But I definitely appreciate having those guided meditations to guide me into like deeper, you know, awarenesses. And my tumor continues to shrink, and basically it's dead. There's no active cancer in my body. Oh. And I still have to get MRIs every 6 months. But it's definitely, you know, I'm surfing again. I've been back surfing for almost a year now. Surfing better than I was even before the diagnosis, and, you know, cycling and hiking and doing so many things that I thought I would never be able to do again. So, you know, I eventually moved out of my mom's house and started back working, and I've been kind of back into my normal life now for, you know, almost a year and a half. So I just was traveling. I went on a surf trip for 6 weeks. I went to Costa Rica.
That's part of the healing.
Yeah, I went to Costa Rica, Cancun, El Salvador, and it was just kind of this trip that I wanted to take to sort of celebrate being pain-free, being over that, you know, hard time in my life. And so it's great.
And then in faith, how was in all this process? Do you believe in God? Do you found inside some connection? How does faith work in all this wonderful end of your story?
Yeah. Well, I've always believed in God. I definitely have a stronger spiritual connection now more than ever. I believe in fate, but I also believe that we can direct our destiny. And if we kind of stay open to our intuition and signs and just not always going with the flow, you know, we can do it our own way. And I think that was kind of the theme in my healing journey, was just find my own way. I didn't want to go this surgery way, so I had to find my own way. And I think anybody can do that.
Yeah, this is so important. You stick to your truth, the
Mm-hmm.
gut, that gut feeling, that how important it is to follow our intuition, right? You had that since the beginning, right?
Yeah.
And it was what brought you here.
Yeah,
That feeling
definitely.
you follow, you had trust, you knew, and you took the matter with your own hands. It's these things all together make all the difference, right? You didn't
Exactly.
give your power away, and because we are talking with such a rare kind of cancer, and people tend to, as we mentioned before, get in this mode of hopeless and then give the power away, and but you, even if you were for such a struggle and hard times and painful times, that was, I think, what moved you, right, kept you going.
Definitely, definitely. So,
And
and another thing that I was reading was there's a great book out there called Radical Remissions.
I was about to tell you, Dr.
Yeah,
Kat,
and it's basically the
it's
9
wonderful.
factors that lead to people healing spontaneously from cancer, and one of the factors was follow your intuition.
Yes.
Yeah, so I remember reading that, but I think I just did that naturally. Like my intuition was that I shouldn't have this surgery. My intuition is that there's another way, so I kind of followed that as
Yeah, I
well.
was about to ask you if you knew her, because Dr. Kelly Turner is amazing. She studied for so many years all this radical remissions story
Mm-hmm.
of cancer. She wrote this amazing book. I fully recommend anyone to read, because it's not only what you mentioned, the intuition, but also the nutrition and the approach that you had. She also mentioned how important it is for us to take matters with our own hands, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
So
it's
I really did try applying like all of those factors to my healing. So it was a great book, a great resource.
yeah, and you had passion as well for life. I think sports, I want to touch this, how important it is to have sports in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
I'm crazy.
Yeah, and the other thing she mentions is that book is like she mentioned these 9 things, but she said if she could mention a 10th healing factor, it would be exercise.
Yes.
And I definitely read a lot about water being so healing for the sacrum. So I was always trying to get in the water, surf
Hmm.
and just, walk, hike, be in nature
Yes.
was important as well.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure that as a surfer, you have that connection. You feel some sort of divine when you are in the water, right? And in
Definitely.
the ocean, right? And because there is in everything, and
Mm-hmm.
important is to have something in our lives to that passion. Because you said to the doctor, "No, I'm not going to drop my surf. I'm not going to drop my biggest passion," right?
Yeah.
And that gave you even more the stimulus to fight for it, because you had that, and how
Yeah.
beautiful it is.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow, Crystal. And what is the biggest life lesson?
I think the biggest life lesson, or the first thing that comes to my mind, I already mentioned, but it's just finding your own way. But it doesn't always only have to apply to like healing, it could be to anything. Like find your own way to, it doesn't always have to be the same way that somebody else did or the same way that somebody else recommends. You can find your own way to do things. And I think that also points to following your intuition again and just taking a step back and not always accepting how things are for everybody else. It doesn't have to be your truth.
Right. Beautiful. And after all this, would you say that life is beautiful?
My life is beautiful. Yes.
Crystal, thank you so much for sharing your experience, your beautiful wisdom. You know, this episode, I'm pretty sure it will help so many people, because your story is absolutely amazing.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And I would also just mention, now like I said, I'm a writer at heart. So I've been working on a blog a new website where I kind of created, I'm trying to create it where, you know, when I was diagnosed, what would I have wanted to find, you know, on the internet, like healing stories and just different ways to heal, like especially the emotional. It was hard for me to find information on how to heal like emotionally or those emotional connections. And I wanted to also have a website that focuses on meditation and spiritual mind body practices and things like that. So I'm putting that into a website called cancerfreeforlife.com. So my story, the full details of my story are also up there if anybody wants to look more into that.
Yeah, and you're writing to support all these people that are going through the same experience.
Exactly. My purpose is to help people who find themselves in the same predicament that I was in. And okay, what can I do? What are, you know, because there's so many websites that focus on the nutrition, which is great.
Right.
I just want it to be like one place where you're focusing on like mind, body, and soul, you know, the physical, the spiritual, the emotional, you know, and putting all aspects into your healing, not just one aspect. But I really think like cancer is like, you really need to come at it all sides.
Yeah, working as a whole, because we are not only one part of us.
Exactly.
Everything together. That's such a beautiful purpose after all this that you went through.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much again.
Thanks for having me.
Miracle Healings can be found at www.theselfartist.com. On YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, search for Self Odyssey. And if you or you know someone that have a healing story and you would like to share with me, don't hesitate and get in touch via Leslie Williams at theselfartist.com. Thank you so much for watching. And don't forget, life is beautiful.